Jase Richardson should be a lottery pick in the 2025 NBA Draft. This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. Jase Richardson averaged about 12 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 turnover, and 1 steal per game at Michigan State. This came on incredible efficiency, which is where his NBA outlook starts. Richardson's true shooting percentage came in at 62.4%, and he hit high marks at the rim and from 3. I've been highlighting Jase since the start of this draft cycle, when my biggest question was whether his efficiency would hold on higher usage. However, the Michigan State freshman eventually entered the Spartans' starting 5, and he just kept excelling. In the NBA, I'm viewing Richardson as a backcourt connector who can dribble, pass, and shoot, and make decisions to different extents. My hope is that he really ramps up his volume from deep, as I think that the 19-year-old can be a really good 3-point shooter. In a high-end outcome, you can think of Richardson in the mold of Jared McCain. The biggest question though, with regards to his profile, honestly, is his size. Richardson measured at just over 6 feet without shoes at the NBA Draft Combine with a 6'6" wingspan. He's more of a 2-guard, or some teams might even perceive him as closer to a wing, so he lacks positional size. Some of the concerns that popped up with Bronny James or DeAnthony Melton might pop up again, although Jase has more twitch. Regardless, I'm confident in Richardson as a combo guard who can play on and off the ball thanks to his speed, feel, and efficiency, but who will likely lean towards operating off the ball more thanks to his catch and shoot ability, connective playmaking, and easy fit next to more ball-dominant stars. I'm expecting Jase Richardson's scoring to begin with his 3-point shooting. The Michigan State prospect made about 41% of his threes on 114 attempts. Focusing on just his catch and shoots, that figure impressively ticks up to almost 46%. Jase's shooting splits are incredibly efficient across the board, but I really wish that his volume was higher. Richardson took a little over 7 threes per 100 possessions, and I would like to see that skyrocket, because I think that the 19-year-old might be a very good 3-point shooter whose efficiency can sustain more attempts. Jase's off-ball shooting is scalable next to bigger primary initiators, whether that's a guard, a wing, or a big. I wish that he was a little bit taller, but he's still about 6'2" in shoes, which isn't terrible depending on how the rest of the lineup is constructed. Still, Richardson's size will probably limit how he can be used, unless he basically becomes undeniable. So sure, I have a high level of confidence in Richardson's 3-point shooting, but I have to keep seeing more. Like I said, more volume, but also more versatility, more range, and more quickness with his release. I'm not convinced that he'll stay in the 40s from 3 once he's in the NBA, but I feel pretty good about a safe floor in the high 30s. Given that Richardson can drill his catch and shoot threes, that gives him the gravity and space to attack closeouts. Richardson prefers to go left, but he can go in both directions. He has really elastic body control after leaving the floor off of 1 foot, and he contorts his limbs into some really bizarre shapes. Richardson only needs 1 or 2 dribbles to get to his spots, but I'm not fully convinced by his process yet. On one hand, Jase has that enticing acrobatic element to his finishing. That is backed up by strong efficiency, which again is the tail when it comes to Richardson's game. As a freshman, he made nearly 69% of his shots at the rim, and in the half court, Jase's conversion at the basket is around 64%. At the same time, Richardson is a little over-reliant on avoiding contact and coming up with tough, unorthodox finishes. That is when he's at the rim, but Richardson can also get downhill, touch the paint, and then transition into a fall away too. He never really pulls up leaning forward, which is interesting. And of course, Richardson does have touch. He makes these shots off of one leg, but I don't really think that he should rely on these. In college, it was harsh to nitpick Jase's efficiency. Looking ahead though, I do think it's valid to question his process. It's also worth scoping out the league and wondering, or at least thinking about, how many players similar to Richardson are thriving. Richardson's pull-up shooting will become much more important if he fulfills his ceiling. Right now, his shot profile definitely slants more towards spot-ups. However, Jase still took a decent amount of shots off the bounce as a freshman. At this juncture, he's more comfortable and efficient from the mid-range than from 3. Thinking back just now to how Jase attacks closeouts, this definitely makes sense. His touch from the mid-range is great, and he really knows how to arc his jumper over bigger, longer defenders. Richardson made about 48% of his two-pointers off the dribble, which is a great figure. However, a closer look reveals that this came on pretty small volume. Extending out to the three-point line, this might be Richardson's swing skill. I'm not overly concerned about his size, even if it's not ideal. I don't mind that he doesn't dominate the ball either. However, I want Richardson to flesh out his three-point shooting as much as possible. If that means remaining an excellent spot-up shooter, that will have value, but I think that Richardson shows some intriguing glimpses off the bounce. Jase only made 10 threes off the dribble in 36 games, so the challenge will be raising that number. A look at his playing history suggests that he can handle more reps on the ball, yet I would be very surprised if he developed into a primary ball handler down the line. That doesn't mean that Richardson cannot add value on the ball though. He flashes upside as a slasher. Once again, you can return to his figures at the basket to see this. Richardson uses his speed to turn the corner out of screens. Really, he prefers to go left when he does this. The Michigan State freshman is small, but he covers ground with his velocity and body control. The same items that I mentioned with how he attacks closeouts apply here. Richardson has a funky athleticism off of 1 foot and around bigger defenders that is kinda hard to read. He'll use float-overs and step-throughs to touch the paint, and sure, Jase has limitations, but I feel like the craft is there to mostly overcome them. My most pressing concern is the size. It would be a lot easier to fully buy into Richardson if he was 6'3" or 6'4". Instead, he's barely 6 feet tall without shoes. Jase can find it challenging against length. He has to rely on tough floaters and double clutch finishes. So whenever Richardson enters the paint and it's packed, getting blocked is definitely a possibility. Then Richardson just has kind of a murky profile. He's not really an on-ball guard. He can definitely make plays with the ball in his hands, but his moments with the rock are brief, if that makes sense. I voiced some of this in my very first evaluation of Richardson in December, and these questions with his finishing should pop up as far as his slashing and self-creation go. But even right now, they're apparent with his floor. For instance, Richardson can get blocked after attacking the closeout. Overall, I'm optimistic, but I feel like he won't stay in the very high 60s at the basket, or at least not immediately. Richardson's somewhat limited self-creation flows into his creation for others. That's the biggest difference between Jase and an adjacent prospect like Kasparas Yakuchonis, in my opinion. Yakuchonis is a very talented passer, while I think that Richardson's playmaking is mostly unremarkable. It's pretty functional, but also on pretty low volume. Focusing on the positives, Jase can make some reads out of the pick and roll. His assist to turnover ratio was great, and his turnovers were very low. Like with his finishing, Richardson executes after touching the paint, be that to generate a three or make the drop-off pass. With the former, the Spartans' guard mostly looks towards his strong side. I didn't find Richardson's turnovers to be concerning, although they speak to the questions about his game. Jase had some problems attacking closeouts, which will be important for him. He needs to make sure that he's reading the defense on time and distributing passes accurately. In this regard, Richardson's size limits the angles that he has access to. In college, broadly speaking, he didn't facilitate all that much for others, even if the decisions that he made were usually correct. In the build-up to the draft, I'm sure that NBA teams were digging into Richardson's past tape in high school to get a deeper look at his on-ball upside. I feel decent about Jase Richardson defensively. He has solid feel and tools in spite of his size, which remains the biggest knock on the Michigan State freshman. This season, Jase averaged 0.3 blocks and 0.8 steals per game. That's not a lot, but it's not low either, taking into account his position and size. I honestly think that Richardson's outlook on this end is relatively straightforward, so I won't take too long. When he's on the ball, the 19-year-old is a twitchy, effective mover. Richardson flips his hips, jumps high, and runs fast. On that first note, Jase can change directions and angles. He has great body control as a whole, like we've been seeing. Richardson smothers drives, and he's disciplined with his closeouts, regardless of whether he needs to stop short or go long. Then, Richardson gets some stocks. He's not exactly a defensive playmaker, but he'll change some shots around the rim, or he'll use his explosion in the passing lanes. Jase plays with an encouraging level of toughness, and I believe that his motor is very reliable. He's guaranteed to play hard and stay engaged. For example, this can happen at the nail. He's generally active there, and he does little things overall that contribute to getting stops. Wrapping up, I like that Richardson doesn't take unnecessary risks or make avoidable mistakes. Like on offense, even if this is harder to measure on this side of the floor, I find Richardson is a very efficient defender thanks to the decisions that he makes. I'm guessing that you'll already know Richardson's biggest limitation, which of course is his size. Really, Jase's defensive margins as a whole are relatively limited. Of course, he lacks height, and then he's long, but only to an extent. Even when Jase stays with the play, the attacker might still score. That would probably happen less if the Spartans freshman had 2 or 3 more inches on his frame. In totality, Richardson lacks the tools to recover whenever he has to do that. I don't think that this happens to a concerning degree, but it's definitely worth pointing out. Finally, there's an argument to be made that Jase will be positionally limited. That is, he'll only defend guards, but I think that this sounds more dramatic than it really is. Richardson will guard 1s and 2s, and I expect that there will usually be a player on the floor around his dimensions for him to defend.